The fork froze halfway to her mouth. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head in Liberty Hall Steakhouse turned toward the corner booth where Victoria Brennan sat in her sleek titanium wheelchair. Dark hair cascading over a navy blazer that probably cost more than most
Thank you.
people's
I'm
monthly
so
rent.
glad we're here
The
together.
silence rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water, spreading from table to table until the only sound was the clink of ice in expensive Scotch glasses and the man's voice cutting through the air sharp enough to draw blood. Marcus Thornton stood there in his $3,000 suit, face twisted in something between shock and disgust, gesturing at her chair like it was evidence in a criminal trial. The words came out loud, deliberate, meant for the entire restaurant to hear. "You're in a wheelchair? Is this some kind of joke?" Victoria's fingers tightened on the leather armrest, knuckles going white against the dark material. Her face remained perfectly composed. That mask she'd spent 4 years perfecting, the one that said nothing touched her, nothing hurt. But inside, something twisted painfully. She'd known this was a risk. Dating apps didn't have checkboxes for paralyzed from the waist down, didn't offer filters for men who could see past medical equipment to the woman using it. Still, the public humiliation burned hotter than she'd anticipated. Marcus wasn't finished. "I matched with a successful woman, not a charity case. You should have disclosed." His hand waved vaguely toward her chair, unable or unwilling to name what he saw there. "This condition." Gasps rippled through the dining room. A waiter near the kitchen entrance froze. Water pitcher suspended mid-pour. A couple 3 tables over pretended to study their menus while obviously straining to hear every word. Someone's phone lifted, camera lens catching the light as it angled toward the scene. Victoria sat straighter, shoulders pulling back the way her mother Catherine had taught her long before the accident. Her voice emerged low, measured, carrying none of the hurt churning in her chest. "I didn't think I had to explain myself. I came here for conversation. If you came for a fantasy, I'm not it." Marcus laughed, the sound cruel enough to make the sommelier wince. "You're right about that." Then louder, playing to his audience now, ensuring maximum damage. "I thought I matched with Victoria Brennan, the director at Genesis Med, the biotech genius. Not some sympathy case who can't even walk." There it was. He knew exactly who she was. Recognition spread through the restaurant in whispers barely hidden behind raised napkins and cupped hands. Someone mouthed, "Is that really her?" Victoria felt the familiar weight of being on display, vulnerable in a way she hadn't experienced since those first terrible months in the hospital. Her throat tightened as she reached for her purse, already calculating the quickest exit route, the path that would minimize the number of pitying stares she'd have to endure. The voice cut through the tension like a clean blade, calm and steady, and completely unexpected. "I think that's enough." Every head swiveled toward the entrance, where a man stood silhouetted against the streetlights, filtering through the glass doors. Broad shoulders filled out a worn denim jacket that had seen better days, work boots leaving faint scuff marks on the polished marble floor. He moved through the restaurant with quiet purpose, passing the stunned host without a glance, his eyes locked not on Marcus, but on Victoria. The scent of motor oil and honest work followed him, incongruous among the truffle risotto and aged wine. He stopped beside her wheelchair, hand resting gently on the push handle, not presuming to touch her, not treating her like an object that needed moving, just establishing his position clearly. "Are you ready to go?" Victoria blinked, momentarily confused. Was this another layer of Marcus's cruel joke? Some coordinated humiliation she hadn't seen coming? But the man's gaze was steady, kind in a way that didn't carry pity, just presence. She gave a small nod, still wary but willing to escape this nightmare by whatever means presented itself. The man turned to face Marcus, who stood slack-jawed at the interruption. "She deserves better." The statement was simple, delivered without raising his voice, but it seemed to fill the entire restaurant. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, looked around for support that wasn't coming. The other diners suddenly found their plates fascinating. With that, the stranger gently turned Victoria's chair, guiding her toward the door. No one stopped them. No one dared speak. They left behind a stunned silence and the image of a man who hadn't raised his voice, only his presence. Outside, the November air hit Victoria's face cool and sharp, carrying the smell of rain-soaked asphalt and the distant Delaware River. Her shoulders began to ease from their rigid position as they moved away from the restaurant's golden glow into the dimly lit street. The stranger let go of her chair once they reached the sidewalk, respecting boundaries she hadn't even had to voice. "I'm Nathan Parker." He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets now, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over like that. I just couldn't watch that happen." Victoria looked up at him properly for the first time, taking in the stubbled jaw, the calloused hands, the grease stain on his collar that he'd probably stopped noticing years ago. His eyes held something unexpected, though, a quiet dignity that resonated somewhere deep in her chest. "You don't even know me." "No." Nathan shrugged, the gesture easy and honest. "Didn't need to. Nobody deserves that kind of treatment." Victoria exhaled slowly, feeling some of the humiliation begin to fade, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. "Thank you, I'm Victoria." The corner of his mouth lifted in a small smile. "I figured your face is on the side of the Genesis Med building downtown." Despite everything, a surprised laugh escaped her throat. It felt foreign there, unfamiliar after months of careful control. "Not my best angle." They stood in silence for a moment, just city sounds and her heartbeat gradually returning to normal. The awkwardness of the situation settled between them, neither quite sure what came next. Victoria became acutely aware of how hungry she still was, having barely touched her water before Marcus's performance began. "I didn't get to eat." She admitted it quietly, suddenly aware of how pathetic that sounded. Nathan glanced back at the restaurant, then down the street. "Doesn't look like you missed much anyway." He paused, then added, "There's a BBQ truck around the corner. Nothing fancy, but Smokey Joe makes the best ribs in Philadelphia." Victoria hesitated. Years of careful image management warred with the simple human desire for food and conversation without judgment. Her security team would have opinions. Her assistant Jenny would probably have a minor panic attack. But Nathan waited patiently, making no move to persuade her, just offering an option and letting her choose. "Lead the way." For the first time in years, Victoria followed someone not out of obligation or strategy, but because she wanted to. Because sometimes healing begins with disaster, and sometimes the right person walks in just when the world walks out. The BBQ truck sat on the corner of Market and 11th, chrome sides reflecting the streetlights in warped patterns. The smell of hickory smoke and brown sugar rub filled the air, mixing with the exhaust from passing cars and the yeasty scent from the brewery 2 blocks over. Families occupied mismatched folding chairs around the truck, laughter and the clink of beer bottles weaving through the night. Victoria felt strange here, out of place in her carefully chosen outfit, but oddly at ease in a way the upscale restaurant had never managed. Nathan ordered for them both, 2 rib plates with cornbread and coleslaw, bottles of local root beer. When he reached for his wallet, Victoria moved to stop him, but he shook his head. "My invitation, my treat." The simplicity of it, the lack of calculation or expectation, caught her off guard. They found a spot at one of the tables, Nathan positioning himself across from her where she could comfortably reach everything. He'd thought about the logistics without making a production of it, the kind of consideration that came from genuine awareness rather than performative accommodation. The server approached with their order, a woman in her 50s named Betty, whose apron advertised 15 years at Smokey Joe's. She leaned awkwardly over Victoria to set down the plate, and a streak of thick BBQ sauce slipped from a rib, splattering across Victoria's leather shoe and the footrest of her chair. Betty's face went white. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, hun." Victoria froze. Heat flushed her face. This was exactly the kind of accident she dreaded. Moments that magnified the chair, her difference, her inability to maneuver quickly out of harm's way. She braced for what came next, the server's flustered apologies, the pitying looks from other diners, Nathan's discomfort turning the whole evening awkward and strained. Instead, Nathan calmly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded cloth rag, the kind mechanics carry. "Hold on." Before she could protest, he crouched beside her chair. With easy, unhurried movements, he dabbed the sauce from the Italian leather. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he gently lifted her foot, supporting it with both hands, and carefully wiped the footrest clean before placing her foot back with the same care someone might handle fine crystal. Not a hint of hesitation, not a flicker of pity, just practical kindness, respect made tangible. There. He straightened, tucking the now stained rag back in his pocket, good as new. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure what words could possibly carry the weight of her gratitude. No one had touched her like that in 4 years, not since before the accident. Every gesture from others had been heavy with awkwardness or dripping with condescension, people either treating her like fragile glass or a problem requiring special handling. But Nathan's touch was different. Steady, practical, kind. He touched her the way he'd touch anyone, with simple human consideration untainted by assumptions about what she could or couldn't handle. Thank you. The words came out barely above a whisper. Nathan shrugged lightly, already reaching for his own food. It's just sauce. No. Victoria's voice emerged firmer now, more certain. It isn't. Their eyes met across the small table. For a moment, the chatter of the crowd, the hiss of the grill, the clatter of utensils against paper plates, all of it faded. Victoria saw in Nathan something she hadn't expected to find tonight. A man who looked at her without agenda, without judgment. She realized with a sharp ache in her chest that this was the first time in years someone had treated her as whole. Not defined by what she'd lost, but seen for who she was. Nathan broke the moment with a smile, gesturing to the food. Eat before it gets cold. Trust me, BBQ. Like this doesn't wait. She laughed softly, a sound she hardly recognized as her own, and took a bite. The taste of hickory smoke and spice spread across her tongue, simple and real and perfect. It wasn't just food, it was freedom. The conversation flowed easier than Victoria had expected. Nathan talked about engines and the satisfaction of fixing things, his eyes lighting up when he described a particularly challenging restoration job on a '67 Mustang Fastback. I've always believed there's something almost spiritual about bringing something broken back to life, finding the problem, understanding how all the parts work together, then making it whole again. Victoria found herself captivated not just by his words, but by the authenticity behind them. No performative interest, no hidden agenda trying to impress the director of a medical device company, just genuine love for his craft, spoken with the same reverence some people reserve for art or music. What about you? Nathan wiped his hands on a napkin, genuinely curious. How did you end up at Genesis Med? The question was direct in a way that should have felt invasive, but didn't. Victoria traced the rim of her root beer bottle, considering how much truth to offer. I founded the mobility division after my accident. She watched his face carefully for the usual reactions. I was on track to take over my father's pharmaceutical company, but after the crash, he decided I wasn't fit to lead anymore. Nathan's expression darkened, but not with pity, with something closer to anger on her behalf. Because of the wheelchair? Officially, because of concerns about my health and ability to handle stress. Victoria heard the bitterness creep into her own voice. Unofficially, yes. The wheelchair. The board agreed with him. So I took my mother's inheritance and started the division at Genesis Med, focused on neural regeneration and adaptive technology. Things that were suddenly very personal to me. And now your division outperforms your father's company. Nathan's smile carried approval rather than surprise. Hard not to be impressed. Victoria looked up, startled. You researched me? Just the basics. Nathan met her gaze directly. Wanted to understand what I was walking into. But yeah, hard not to be impressed by someone who turned being told they couldn't do something into proof that they absolutely could. The honesty was refreshing. Most men either pretended not to know who she was or acted like her money and position made her more desirable. Nathan simply acknowledged the facts and moved on, interested in her as a person rather than as a title or bank account. What about you? Victoria leaned forward slightly. Have you always been a mechanic? A shadow crossed Nathan's face, brief but unmistakable. No, I was studying mechanical engineering at MIT. Full scholarship, senior year. He paused, seeming to debate how much to share. My sister happened. Or more accurately, her addiction happened. She overdosed 5 years ago, left behind her son Tyler. He was 3. Victoria's chest tightened. What did you do? Nathan's voice softened in a way that told her everything about what kind of man he was. Someone had to step up. I was the only family left. So I dropped out, got custody, came back to Philly, opened the garage. You gave up your degree? Victoria couldn't keep the shock from her voice. Nathan smiled, but it was the saddest smile she'd ever seen. I gave up one future, but I gained a son. He's 9 now, smart as hell, wants to be an astrophysicist. The smile grew genuine, worth everything. The simple declaration held more integrity than any boardroom speech Victoria had ever heard. She found herself wanting to know more about this man who'd sacrificed his own dreams without a trace of self-pity, who spoke of raising his nephew with the kind of love most people reserve for their biological children. Before she could respond, Nathan glanced at his watch. I should get back. Left Tyler with Mrs. Chen next door, and I've got 3 cars waiting at the shop tomorrow. He stood, then hesitated. I'd like to see you again, if you want. Victoria felt something flutter in her chest, hope mixed with fear and the dangerous possibility of something good. Are you sure about that? I'm not exactly in your social circle. Nathan's laugh was genuine and warm. Maybe that's exactly why I'm sure. The walk back to where Victoria's driver waited felt too short. Nathan matched her pace without making a show of it, keeping the conversation light but leaving spaces comfortable rather than awkward. When they reached her car, he stepped back, giving her room. Next time, I choose the place. Nathan's eyes crinkled at the corners. Victoria found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time all evening. Deal. She watched him walk away, disappearing into the Philadelphia night, and felt the dangerous stirring of something she'd thought the accident had taken from her. Not just attraction, but the possibility that someone might see her, all of her, and choose to stay. The penthouse apartment felt especially cold when Victoria returned, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the city lights against the darkness of her living room. Everything gleamed, chrome and glass and polished hardwood, the space meticulously designed to accommodate her wheelchair while hiding that fact from casual observers. Ramps disguised as gentle slopes, counters at perfect heights, doorways widened just enough. A beautiful cage built to her specifications. Her phone buzzed as she transferred from chair to sofa, a carefully choreographed movement she'd perfected through thousands of repetitions. Jenny, her assistant, checking if the networking dinner had gone well. Victoria tapped out a quick response, saying nothing about the disaster or the unexpected rescue. She set the phone aside and wheeled to the windows, looking out at the city sprawled below like a circuit board of lights. Somewhere out there, Nathan Parker had returned to his life, probably already forgetting about her. The thought created a strange emptiness in her chest. She'd built so much since the accident, rebuilt herself from broken pieces into something functional, successful even. But she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as simply Victoria, not the inspirational CEO in the wheelchair, not the disabled daughter who'd defied her father's expectations, just a woman worthy of basic human consideration. The accident flashed through her mind unbidden. Screeching tires, shattering glass, the peculiar sensation of impact and then nothing. Waking to harsh hospital lights and her father Richard's ashen face. The doctor's grave expression as he explained incomplete spinal cord injury, T10 level, sensation retained below, but limited motor function. 5 years of rebuilding followed. Physical therapy until her arms screamed. Psychological therapy to address the anger and grief. Taking back control of the Genesis Med Mobility Division from board members who'd written her off the moment she'd woken up unable to walk. She'd become the inspirational disabled executive, featured in Forbes and TechCrunch, the woman who turned personal tragedy into innovation. But somewhere in building that image, she'd lost the ability to just be Victoria. Until tonight, when a mechanic with grease under his fingernails had treated her like a person first and everything else second. Her phone lit up again, this time with a number she didn't recognize. A text message appeared. Thank you for tonight. I'd like to return the favor sometime. Victoria stared at the screen, heart doing something complicated in her chest. She shouldn't respond. This was Nathan Parker, a man who lived above his garage, who'd given up MIT to raise his sister's child, whose annual income probably didn't match what she spent on shoes in a year. They inhabited different worlds, And everyone knew cross-class fairy tales ended badly in real life. But her fingers moved almost of their own accord. You don't owe me anything, but I wouldn't say no to coffee. The response came almost immediately. Good night, Victoria. For the first time in months, she smiled at her empty apartment, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. The Genesis Med building rose 30 stories from the Philadelphia skyline, glass and steel announcing innovation in every clean line. Victoria's office occupied the 12th floor, positioned to overlook both the city and the research labs below. Monday morning found her reviewing prototypes with her engineering team, her wheelchair positioned at the head of the conference table like a throne she'd earned through blood and brilliance. Dr. Alan Ross, lead engineer, pulled up schematics on the main screen. The pressure distribution in the new mobility exoskeleton is still showing inconsistencies at the knee joint. We're getting microfailures under sustained load. Victoria leaned forward, studying the data with the intensity that had made her division the most profitable arm of Genesis Med. The hydraulic system needs reinforcement. Switch to titanium aluminum alloy for the joint housing. Yes, it'll increase cost by 30%, but this device is for people with incomplete spinal injuries. It cannot fail. Alan nodded, already making notes. Some board members won't like the cost increase. Then they can come explain to our test subjects why we're giving them equipment that might collapse mid-stride. Victoria's voice carried the steel that had gotten her through 5 years of people underestimating what a woman in a wheelchair could accomplish. We're not building budget equipment, we're building freedom. Run the simulations again with the new specs. The meeting continued for another hour, Victoria dissecting every detail with surgical precision. This was her element, the place where the wheelchair became irrelevant because her mind was the asset that mattered. By the time the engineers filed out, she felt the familiar satisfaction of work well done. Jenny Martinez appeared in the doorway the moment the last engineer left, tablet in hand and that knowing look on her face. Boss, you seem different today, almost glowing. Did something happen at that networking dinner? Victoria kept her expression neutral, but she could feel heat creeping up her neck. It was fine. Jenny moved closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Fine doesn't make you check your phone every 30 seconds. I've worked for you 3 years. You never check your phone during meetings. She glanced at the device sitting face up on Victoria's desk. And you've got a text notification from an unsaved number. Victoria flipped the phone over, but it was too late. Jenny had seen, and Jenny had opinions about everything from Victoria's work schedule to her non-existent social life. It's nothing. Nothing makes you smile like that? Jenny settled into the chair across from Victoria's desk, clearly prepared to extract information. I'm your assistant and your friend. Tell me about him. The memory of Nathan's calm voice, his steady hands wiping BBQ sauce from her shoe, the way he'd looked at her like she was worth defending, flooded back. He's different, that's all. Different how? Victoria hesitated, then decided there was no point hiding it. Jenny would find out eventually. She always did. He doesn't know who I am. Well, he knows my name, but he doesn't care about the money or the position. He just sees me. Jenny's expression softened. That's rare, I know. Victoria looked out the window at the city below, which is why it probably won't work. We're from completely different worlds. Or maybe that's exactly why it will work. Jenny stood, heading for the door. Don't overthink it. Just see where it goes. After Jenny left, Victoria sat alone with her thoughts, and the city spread out before her like a challenge. Her phone buzzed again. Nathan this time, with an address for Saturday morning coffee. A place called Rosie's Cafe in Fishtown. Nothing fancy, just good coffee and better conversation. She was typing her acceptance when her office phone rang. The name on the caller ID made her stomach drop. Richard Brennan. Her father calling on the private line he only used for important matters. Victoria considered letting it go to voicemail, but Richard didn't give up easily. Better to face it now. His voice came through crisp and controlled, the tone of a man who'd built a pharmaceutical empire through calculated decisions and strategic moves. Victoria, I heard you had an interesting evening Friday. Of course he'd heard. Richard had connections throughout Philadelphia's business community, eyes and ears that reported back like a private intelligence network. How many people do you have watching me, Dad? I have friends who care about your well-being. Richard's deflection was smooth as aged whiskey. They mentioned you left Liberty Hall rather abruptly. With an unknown man, my personal life isn't your concern anymore. Victoria kept her voice level, refusing to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under her skin. Everything about you is my concern. You're a Brennan. Richard paused, and Victoria could practically hear him choosing his next words carefully. Who is he? None of your business. I can find out myself. His tone shifted slightly, revealing the steel beneath the paternal concern. But I'd rather hear it from you. Victoria closed her eyes, fighting the familiar rage that came with her father's need to control everything she did. Then you'll be disappointed. I'm not discussing this with you. Victoria, please. Richard's voice softened in a way that was somehow worse than his commanding tone. After your mother died, after the accident, I only want what's best for you. The mention of Catherine Brennan, dead 3 years from a cancer that had consumed her in months, hit like a physical blow. Don't use Mom against me. She'd be happy I found someone kind. Kind doesn't pay bills or provide security. Richard's businessman voice returned. I'm looking out for you by investigating everyone I speak to. Victoria felt her grip tighten on the phone. I know you, Dad. You're already digging into his background. Silence on the line confirmed what Victoria already knew. Richard would be thorough, would find every detail of Nathan's life, and try to use it to prove whatever point he had already decided was true. My personal life is my own. Victoria kept her voice firm. Not yours to manage or approve. We'll see. Richard's response carried the weight of unfinished business. I'll call you next week. The line went dead, leaving Victoria staring at her phone with a mix of anger and dread. She knew her father. When Richard Brennan set his mind to something, he pursued it with the same ruthless efficiency that had made him millions. And right now, he'd set his sights on Nathan Parker, a man who had no idea what kind of scrutiny was about to descend on him. Victoria pulled up Nathan's last text, reading it again. The simplicity of the invitation, the lack of calculation or expectation, felt like oxygen after drowning. She typed back, Saturday at 10, looking forward to it. Whatever storm her father was brewing, she'd face it when it came. For now, she had coffee to look forward to and the memory of a man who'd seen her as worth defending. That would have to be enough. Parker's Auto Works occupied a corner lot in Kensington, the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors and corner stores still operated on handshake credit. The garage itself was a 2-story brick building that had probably been there since the 50s. Garage bays on the ground floor, and Nathan's apartment up a narrow exterior staircase. The sign out front was hand-painted, simple, and honest, promising quality work at fair prices. Nathan slid out from under a Cadillac Escalade, transmission fluid staining his coveralls, and grabbed a shop rag to wipe his hands. The torque converter had seized exactly like he'd predicted, requiring a complete flush and replacement of the solenoid pack. 3 hours of work, but he'd have it done by afternoon like he'd promised the customer. Frank Russo emerged from the office, clipboard in hand, gray hair showing under his Phillies cap. Boss, we got Mrs. Chen's Camry coming in at 2. The Henderson truck needs new brake pads, and that Mustang restoration is ready for paint if you want to check it before we commit. Nathan nodded, already mentally organizing the workflow. Tommy can handle the Camry. I'll take the truck. Let me look at the Mustang now. The 67 Fastback sat in the back bay, cherry red paint gleaming under the shop lights. Nathan had been restoring it for 6 months. Every spare hour poured into bringing the classic muscle car back to its original glory. His hands moved over the bodywork, checking for imperfections, finding none. Tommy Harris had done beautiful work on the final sanding. She's ready. Nathan stepped back, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Tell Tommy to start the paint process tomorrow. Frank made a note, then glanced at Nathan with the expression of a man who'd known him long enough to read moods. You seem different today. Distracted, but in a good way. Just got a lot on my mind. Nathan headed back toward the Escalade, not ready to discuss his personal life with his shop manager yet. Tommy called from across the garage, wrench in hand and a knowing grin on his face. Boss got a date or something? Man's been checking his phone every 5 minutes. Frank's eyebrows rose. You're seeing someone? Nathan climbed back under the Escalade, letting the mechanics of the transmission occupy his attention. Just having coffee with someone, it's not a big deal. Tommy's laugh echoed through the shop. Man doesn't get under a car to avoid talking unless it's a big deal. What's her name? Victoria. Nathan kept his voice casual, but saying her name out loud made something warm settle in his chest. We met Friday night. And? Tommy wasn't letting this go, apparently determined to extract every detail. And she's smart, interesting, different from anyone I've dated before. Nathan finished disconnecting the torque converter, sliding out to grab the replacement part. That's all I'm saying. Frank exchanged a glance with Tommy, both men clearly amused by their boss's reticence. Well, good for you. About time you got back out there. The rest of the morning passed in the comfortable rhythm of work. Cars came and went, customers collected their vehicles. New problems rolled into the bays. Nathan lost himself in the satisfaction of diagnosis and repair, the clean logic of mechanical systems where every problem had a solution if you were patient enough to find it. By lunchtime, he'd finished the Escalade and moved on to the Henderson truck. The apartment above the garage called to him with the promise of a quick sandwich and maybe 5 minutes off his feet, but he pushed through, wanting to clear the board before Tyler got home from school. At 3:30, he heard the familiar sound of sneakers pounding up the exterior stairs. Tyler burst into the garage, backpack bouncing, face lit up with the kind of excitement only a 9-year-old could maintain after a full day of school. "Chew Nate, I got 100 on my math test, the hardest one all year." Nathan wiped his hands and pulled his nephew into a hug, breathing in the scent of playground dirt and pencil shavings. "That's my guy, always the smart one in the family. Let me see." Tyler produced a crumpled test paper with a perfect score marked in red at the top. "Ms. Anderson said I should consider the math club. She thinks I could do competitions." Pride swelled in Nathan's chest. "What do you think? You want to try it?" Tyler's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, adult concerns creeping into his young face. Would it cost money? For the competitions? The question gutted Nathan like it always did when Tyler showed awareness of their financial reality. "We'll make it work, buddy. If you want to do it, we'll find a way." "Okay," Tyler's smile returned, pure and trusting in the way that reminded Nathan exactly why he'd given up MIT without a second thought. "Can I do homework in the office?" Nathan set him up at the desk with his books, then returned to the Henderson truck. Through the office window, he could see Tyler bent over his work, pencil moving with careful precision. The kid deserved everything, deserved better than a 2-bedroom apartment above a garage and an uncle who counted pennies to afford school supplies. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Victoria confirming Saturday, asking if 10 would still work. Nathan typed back, "Perfect. See you then." Frank appeared beside him, following his gaze to Tyler in the office. "That kid's going places. You're doing good with him." Nathan thought about the bills stacked on his kitchen counter. Rent due next week, Tyler would need new sneakers soon, and the hydraulic lift in Bay 2 was making concerning noises that probably meant expensive repairs in the near future. "Yeah, just hope I'm doing enough. You gave up your whole future for that boy." Frank's voice carried the weight of someone who'd watched the whole thing unfold. "That's more than enough. But was it?" Nathan looked at his grease-stained hands, thought about the degree he'd never finished, the career he'd never started. He'd made his choice and never regretted it. But sometimes late at night when Tyler was asleep and the bills were spread across the kitchen table, he wondered if loving someone was enough when you couldn't give them everything they deserved. His phone buzzed again. Not Victoria this time, but Mrs. Chen from next door, Tyler's usual after-school babysitter. The text was short. "Saw your nephew after school. Such a good boy. You're doing wonderful, Nathan." Small kindnesses from neighbors who'd watched him transform from MIT scholarship student to garage owner overnight, who'd seen him learn to braid hair and pack lunches and show up for parent-teacher conferences. The community had rallied around him and Tyler in ways that still took his breath away. Tommy finished up the Camry and headed out, clocking out with a wave. Frank stayed behind, helping Nathan close up the shop for the night. As they pulled down the bay doors, Frank turned to Nathan with the expression of someone about to say something he thought needed saying. "This woman you're seeing, she from around here?" Nathan paused, considering how much to reveal. "She lives downtown, works in medical devices." Frank nodded slowly. "Different world from this place." "Yeah." Nathan couldn't deny it. "Very different. Just be careful, boss." Frank's concern was genuine, born from years of friendship. Sometimes different worlds don't mix easy. "I know." Nathan looked up at the apartment windows where light glowed from Tyler's room. But sometimes you gotta try anyway. He climbed the stairs to find Tyler at the kitchen table, homework spread out alongside the materials for a science project due next month. The kid had decided to build a model of the solar system, complete with orbits and moons. It was ambitious for fourth grade, but that was Tyler, always reaching for something bigger. "What are you working on, bud?" Tyler looked up, eyes bright behind the glasses he'd only recently started wearing. "Trying to figure out the scale for Saturn's rings. They're really complicated." Nathan sat down across from him, looking at the sketches and calculations Tyler had attempted. "Want some help?" Together they worked through the math, Nathan guiding but letting Tyler do the actual problem solving. These moments, helping with homework at the kitchen table, felt more important than any degree he might have earned. This was fatherhood in its purest form, showing up day after day for the small moments that added up to a life. Dinner was simple, burgers and fries that Nathan cooked while Tyler set the table. They ate together, talking about school and the science project, and whether Jupiter's red spot was a storm or something else entirely. Normal conversation in a life that had been built from grief and determination. Ordinary moments that felt precious because of how easily they might never have existed. After Tyler went to bed, Nathan sat alone in the small living room, looking at bills he'd been avoiding. The numbers didn't add up the way he needed them to. The garage was doing okay, but okay meant treading water, not getting ahead. One bad month, one major equipment failure, and they'd be in real trouble. His phone sat on the coffee table, Victoria's last message still on the screen. He thought about her penthouse apartment, the designer wheelchair, the casual way she'd mentioned working in medical devices like it was nothing. She probably had more money in her checking account than he'd see in 5 years. What was he doing, pursuing someone so far out of his league? But then he remembered the way she'd looked at him when he'd wiped the BBQ sauce from her shoe. Like he'd done something remarkable instead of basic human decency. Like she wasn't used to being treated like a person instead of a problem or a symbol. Maybe the money didn't matter as much as he feared. Maybe what mattered was seeing each other clearly, without the filters society tried to impose. Tyler's voice drifted from his bedroom, not quite asleep yet. "Chew, Nate." Nathan got up and went to the doorway. "What's up, buddy?" Tyler was curled under his covers, surrounded by glow-in-the-dark stars Nathan had helped him arrange on the ceiling in actual constellation patterns. "Ms. Anderson says, if you love something, you should be brave about it, even if it's scary." Nathan leaned against the doorframe, wondering what had prompted this particular piece of wisdom. "That sounds like good advice. Do you think that's true?" "Yeah, bud. I think trying is always braver than not trying." Nathan thought about MIT, about the scholarship he'd walked away from, about every choice he'd made that had led him here. Sometimes the brave thing and the right thing are the same thing. Tyler nodded, satisfied with this answer, and burrowed deeper into his blankets. "Love you, Chew, Nate." "Love you too, Tyler." Nathan turned off the light, leaving the door cracked the way Tyler liked it. Back in the living room, Nathan picked up his phone and looked at Victoria's message one more time. Different worlds, Frank had said. But Nathan had already chosen to live in a different world than the one he'd been headed for. He'd chosen Tyler over MIT, Kensington over wherever a mechanical engineering degree might have taken him. Maybe choosing Victoria was just another way of being brave about what mattered. He sent a text. "Looking forward to Saturday. Sleep well, Victoria." Her response came minutes later. "You too, Nathan." For the first time in years, Nathan let himself imagine a future that included more than just getting by. A future where maybe, just maybe, someone like Victoria Brennan might want to build something with someone like him. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The kind of risk that could end in heartbreak, but might also lead somewhere worth going. He looked at the bills one more time, then put them away. Tomorrow's problems could wait for tomorrow. Tonight, he had coffee to look forward to, and the memory of a woman who'd laughed at his jokes and looked at him like he mattered. That would have to be enough. Rosie's Cafe occupied a corner storefront in Fishtown, the kind of neighborhood place where regulars had their own mugs and the owner knew everyone's order by heart. Saturday morning sunlight filtered through windows that hadn't been updated since the 80s, casting warm squares across mismatched wooden tables and chairs that had probably been collected from yard sales over decades. the smell of fresh ground coffee mixed with cinnamon rolls baking somewhere in the back. Nathan arrived 20 minutes early, nervous energy driving him from the apartment before he could overthink everything. He'd already called ahead, spoken to Rosie herself about making sure the corner table near the window had enough space for a wheelchair to maneuver comfortably. The owner had been accommodating without making a fuss, simply rearranging chairs and promising the path would stay clear. Victoria appeared exactly at 10, wheeling herself through the door with the kind of efficient grace that came from years of practice. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger, more relaxed than she'd been at Liberty Hall. Nathan stood, then caught himself, unsure of the etiquette. Should he help? Would that insult her independence? She solved the problem by wheeling straight to the table he'd prepared, taking in the thoughtful spacing with a small smile that told him she'd noticed and appreciated the consideration. "This is perfect, thank you." They ordered an Americano for her and black coffee for him, and fell into conversation that flowed easier than Nathan had any right to expect. Victoria asked about the garage, genuinely interested in the mechanics of restoration work, and Nathan found himself explaining the intricacies of rebuilding a Mustang's transmission with the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for talking to other mechanics. There's something almost spiritual about bringing something broken back to life. Nathan traced patterns on the table with his finger, trying to articulate what he felt when an engine finally turned over after weeks of careful work. Finding the problem, understanding how all the parts work together, making it whole again. It's like solving a puzzle where the answer matters to someone's daily life. Victoria's eyes held something warm and engaged. "I understand that more than you might think." She took a sip of her coffee, seeming to weigh how much to share. "That's what we do at Genesis Med. Try to restore function people were told was permanently lost." "What kind of devices?" Nathan leaned forward, genuinely curious. "Mobility aids mostly. Advanced wheelchairs, exoskeleton prototypes, neural stimulation systems." Victoria's voice carried the passion of someone discussing their life's work. Equipment designed by people who actually understand what it's like to need it, because of your own experience. Nathan kept his tone gentle, making it clear he was asking, not assuming. "Exactly." Victoria met his gaze directly, no shame or discomfort in her expression. "If I have to live with this, I'm going to make sure the technology is the best it can be. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after." The conviction in her voice stirred something in Nathan's chest, admiration mixed with the growing certainty that this woman was extraordinary in ways that had nothing to do with her bank account or professional success. She'd taken something that could have broken her and turned it into fuel for helping others. That took a kind of strength most people never had to discover in themselves. "Tell me about Tyler." Victoria shifted the conversation with the ease of someone genuinely interested in his life, not just making polite conversation. 9 years old and already planning to be an astrophysicist? Nathan's face lit up the way it always did when discussing his nephew. "He's brilliant, scary smart sometimes. He taught himself orbital mechanics from YouTube videos because he wanted his science project to be accurate." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "I dropped out of MIT to raise him, and sometimes I think he's going to end up smarter than I ever would have been." "You were at MIT?" Victoria's surprise was evident. "Full scholarship, you said?" "Senior year mechanical engineering when Sarah died." Nathan's throat tightened the way it always did when talking about his sister. Tyler was 3, no other family, and the choices were pretty simple. Finish school while he went into foster care, or become his legal guardian and come home. That must have been impossibly hard. Victoria's empathy was genuine, not performative sympathy, but real understanding of difficult choices. Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise for what felt like the only possible decision. "It was hard for about a week. Then Tyler called me Chunate for the first time and asked if I was staying forever. After that, it wasn't hard at all, just clear." The simple declaration hung between them, carrying more weight than Nathan had intended. Victoria looked at him with something in her expression that made his heart beat faster, like she was seeing past the surface to something deeper and liking what she found there. "Can I meet him?" The question came out soft, almost tentative. "Tyler, I mean, if you're comfortable with that." The request caught Nathan off guard. In his limited dating experience since taking custody, women had been fine with the abstract concept of his nephew, but less enthusiastic about actually integrating a 9-year-old into their time together. Victoria asking to meet Tyler felt significant in a way that made Nathan both hopeful and terrified. Yeah, Nathan heard his voice come out rougher than intended, emotion making it unsteady. I'd like that. He'd really like you. They stayed at the cafe for 2 hours, conversation ranging from Tyler's science project to Victoria's work on neural regeneration technology to Nathan's dream of maybe someday finishing his degree. The time passed in that strange, elastic way where minutes felt both endless and far too short, the outside world fading until there was only the small table, the coffee going cold, and the growing sense that something important was beginning. When they finally left, Nathan walked beside Victoria's chair through the Fishtown streets, past murals and corner stores, and the kind of lived-in neighborhood character that made Philadelphia feel like a collection of small towns rather than one large city. They talked about nothing important, comfortable silences, filling the spaces between words, and Nathan found himself thinking that this, right here, was what he'd been missing without knowing it. At her car, Victoria turned her chair to face him fully. Next time, would you be okay with me coming to your place? Meeting Tyler there, where he's comfortable? Nathan's chest did something complicated, warmth spreading through it like sunrise. Absolutely. How about next Saturday? I'll make lunch. It's a date. Victoria's smile held promise and the kind of genuine happiness that transformed her whole face. Thank you for this morning, Nathan. He watched her transfer into the back of the car with smooth efficiency, the driver securing her wheelchair with practiced ease. As they pulled away, Nathan stood on the sidewalk feeling like he'd just been handed something precious and fragile, something that could change everything if he was brave enough not to drop it. The week passed in a blur of work and anticipation, every day marked by text messages that grew progressively longer and more personal. Victoria sent him articles about mechanical engineering innovations. Nathan sent her pictures of Tyler's science project progress. They talked about nothing and everything, building familiarity through small revelations and shared observations. Richard Brennan's study smelled of leather and old money, wood paneling and brass fixtures creating an atmosphere of calculated intimidation. The mansion sat in the mainline suburbs, one of those Philadelphia addresses that announced wealth and establishment without needing to advertise. Richard sat behind his desk, a tumbler of scotch catching the lamplight, while Derek Morrison stood across from him with a manila folder thick with information. The private investigator had been thorough. Richard had to give him that. The file contained everything about Nathan Parker's life, reduced to facts and figures that Richard could analyze like a quarterly earnings report. MIT dropout, garage owner, custodial guardian, debt load, income estimates, rental history. Everything quantified and categorized, the way Richard preferred his information. No criminal record. Derek's voice carried the weariness of someone delivering news his client didn't want to hear. Not even a parking ticket. Pays his bills on time when he can, though he's been late on rent twice in the past year. Customers give him excellent reviews, known in the neighborhood as reliable and honest. Richard took a slow sip of scotch, the burn familiar and grounding. There has to be something. Everyone has something. Derek shifted his weight, uncomfortable in a way that told Richard the investigator had opinions about this assignment he was keeping to himself. Mr. Brennan, I've been doing this 20 years. Sometimes people are exactly who they appear to be. Nobody is exactly who they appear to be. Richard set down his glass with controlled precision. Keep digging. Financial records, past relationships, family history. I want to know everything. Already have it all. Derek tapped the folder. His sister Sarah Parker died of an overdose in 2020. Heroin. Medical bills from her final hospitalization came to just over $23,000. Parker's been paying them off slowly, never missed a payment even when it meant being late on other bills. The kid, Tyler, biological father unknown, no other family. Parker got emergency custody within a week of Sarah's death, dropped out of MIT 3 days later, moved back to Philadelphia and opened the garage. Richard absorbed this information, looking for angles, for leverage, for any sign of the con he was certain existed beneath the surface. A man didn't give up MIT on a full scholarship for a nephew unless there was money somewhere in the equation. Insurance payout? Inheritance? Derek anticipated the question. No insurance. Sarah had nothing. The apartment she was renting got cleared out by the landlord. Parker took the kid and whatever fit in his truck. He built the garage business from scratch with a small business loan he's still paying off. Then what's his angle with Victoria? Richard's frustration bled into his voice. A mechanic doesn't pursue a woman like my daughter without seeing dollar signs. Maybe he just likes her. Derek's response carried an edge of judgment that Richard chose to ignore. Richard stood, moving to the window that overlooked manicured grounds Catherine had once loved. The memory of his wife hit unexpectedly, the way it sometimes did in quiet moments. She died 3 years ago, 6 months after Victoria's accident, cancer consuming her with brutal efficiency. In those final weeks, hooked up to machines in the bedroom they'd shared for 30 years, she'd made Richard promise to take care of their daughter. He'd kept that promise the only way he knew how, with money and protection and careful management of risks. But Catherine had also told him something else, words that haunted him in moments like this. You love by controlling, Richard. Someday, you'll control yourself right out of their lives. He'd lost Catherine anyway. The thought of losing Victoria too, of her being used by someone who saw vulnerability and opportunity, made something cold settle in his chest. After the accident, people had come out of nowhere. Investment advisors promising to protect Victoria's inheritance while charging exorbitant fees. Lawyers offering to sue everyone involved while taking 40%. Even a boyfriend who'd lasted 3 months before asking for $200,000 to invest in a startup that Victoria later discovered never existed. Richard had dealt with each threat systematically, protecting his daughter from predators who saw an injured woman with money as an easy target. Nathan Parker fit the profile too perfectly, the struggling business owner conveniently appearing right when Victoria was at her most vulnerable emotionally. I want surveillance on his movements. Richard turned back to Derek, decision made. I want to know who he sees, where he goes, what he's planning. Mr. Brennan, Derek's discomfort became more pronounced. There are legal limits to what I can do, and ethical ones. This man hasn't done anything wrong. Then watching him won't reveal anything problematic, will it? Richard's tone made it clear the discussion was over. I'm not letting my daughter make another mistake. Derek left with obvious reluctance, folder tucked under his arm, leaving Richard alone with his scotch and his certainty that he was protecting Victoria from inevitable heartbreak. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number, unsurprised when she didn't answer. She'd been avoiding his calls since their last conversation, but Richard was patient. Eventually she'd need to talk to him, and when she did, he'd be ready with proof that Nathan Parker was exactly what Richard suspected. The following Saturday arrived with clear skies and the kind of October warmth that made Philadelphia almost perfect. Nathan cleaned the apartment 3 times, changed clothes twice, and generally made Tyler laugh at how nervous he was acting. The kid sat at the kitchen table working on his science project, occasionally looking up to offer observations about his uncle's unusual behavior. You really like her, huh? Tyler attached a carefully painted Saturn to its orbital path, tongue poking out in concentration. Yeah, buddy, I really do. Nathan checked the simple lunch he'd prepared for the 3rd time. Sandwiches, fruit, nothing fancy but made with care. Is she nice? Tyler's question came with the directness of childhood, unfiltered by adult complications. Very nice. Nathan crouched down to Tyler's level. But she uses a wheelchair, which means she can't walk. That okay with you? Tyler looked at him with the kind of wisdom that sometimes emerged from 9-year-old perspectives. Does she like space stuff? Nathan laughed, tension breaking. I don't know yet. We'll find out. Then it doesn't matter about the wheelchair. Tyler returned to his project with the uncomplicated logic of a child who hadn't yet learned to make disabilities into barriers. When Victoria arrived, Nathan buzzed her up and opened the apartment door to find her maneuvering her chair through the narrow hallway with practiced efficiency. She dressed casually, jeans and a sweater that matched her eyes, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger here, outside the corporate environment, more relaxed and real. Welcome to our humble home. Nathan stepped back, suddenly acutely aware of how small the apartment was, how worn the furniture looked, how obvious the financial gap between their lives became in this space. Victoria rolled in, taking in everything with genuine interest rather than judgment. Tyler appeared from the kitchen, science project temporarily abandoned, curiosity winning over shyness. He stopped a few feet away, eyes wide behind his glasses. Hi. His voice came out small but brave. I'm Tyler. Victoria wheeled closer, bringing herself to his eye level with an ease that suggested she'd done this before. Hi, Tyler. I'm Victoria. Your uncle told me you're building something really cool for science class. Tyler's face lit up the way it always did when someone showed real interest in his work. A model of the solar system. Want to see? Nathan watched them disappear into the kitchen, Victoria's questions encouraging Tyler to explain orbital mechanics and planetary composition with increasing enthusiasm. The ease between them felt natural, Victoria engaging with Tyler's intelligence without condescension, Tyler responding with the kind of openness he usually reserved for his favorite teachers. Over lunch, Tyler asked Victoria about her wheelchair with the same directness he'd shown earlier. Why do you use it? Nathan started to intercept, to redirect, but Victoria held up a hand, clearly comfortable with the question. I was in a car accident 4 years ago. My spine got hurt, and now my legs don't work the way they used to. The wheelchair helps me get around. Does it hurt? Tyler's concern was genuine, uncomplicated by pity or awkwardness. Sometimes, but mostly it's just different from before. Like how you use glasses to see better, I use this to move around. Victoria's explanation was matter-of-fact, treating Tyler with the respect of honest answers. Tyler nodded, satisfied with this response. Can I see it up close? Victoria spent the next 10 minutes letting Tyler examine her wheelchair, explaining the joystick controls, the battery system, how it navigated different terrains. Tyler absorbed every detail with the focused intensity he brought to topics that interested him, asking technical questions that would have challenged most adults. This is like a really advanced robot. Tyler's excitement was palpable. Do you help design these? At your job? Victoria's smile was genuine and warm. I do. We're working on even better ones that might help people walk again someday. That's so cool. Tyler looked at Nathan with an expression that clearly said he approved of this development. Chune, Ms. Victoria makes wheelchairs that might cure people. Not exactly cure, but help. Victoria's correction was gentle. Some injuries can't be fixed completely, but we can make life better with good technology. The afternoon progressed with easy conversation. Tyler dragging out his telescope to show Victoria how he'd been tracking Jupiter's moons. Victoria explaining the difference between astronomical observation and space travel with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed teaching. Nathan watched them together, something warm and terrifying expanding in his chest, the realization that Tyler had already attached himself to this woman with the quick affection of childhood. Eventually, Tyler wore himself out and retreated to his room for some quiet reading time, leaving Nathan and Victoria alone in the small living room. The space felt more intimate now, charged with possibility and the growing awareness that this thing between them was becoming something neither of them could easily walk away from. Thank you for letting me meet him. Victoria's voice was soft, genuine. He's wonderful, Nathan. You've done an incredible job. He makes it easy. Nathan settled onto the couch close enough to Victoria's chair that he could have reached out and touched her hand if he'd been brave enough. Most days I feel like I'm just trying to keep up with how fast he's growing and learning. You gave up everything for him. Victoria's observation held no judgment, just recognition of sacrifice. Your degree, your future, probably relationships that couldn't handle a package deal. Nathan met her gaze, needing her to understand this fundamental truth. I didn't give up my future. I chose a different one. There's a difference. The distinction hung between them, heavy with implication. Victoria's eyes held something that looked like understanding mixed with something deeper, something that made Nathan's heart rate pick up speed. My father thinks you're using me. Victoria's words dropped like stones into still water. He had you investigated, found out about your debt, your income, everything he could quantify about your life. Nathan's stomach dropped, anger and hurt warring for dominance. When? Probably the day after he heard we met. Victoria's bitterness was evident. Richard Brennan doesn't let anything happen to his daughter without knowing every detail. Control is how he shows love. What did he find? Nathan kept his voice level, refusing to be ashamed of his life, even as embarrassment heated his face. That you're exactly who you say you are. Victoria wheeled closer, her hand finding his. A good man who made hard choices and lives with integrity. It pissed him off that he couldn't find anything to use against you. Nathan absorbed this, the violation of privacy stinging less than the knowledge that Richard Brennan had already declared him unworthy and was actively looking for proof. Does it matter to you what he thinks? Victoria's grip on his hand tightened. No, but it matters that he won't stop. My father is persistent when he decides he knows what's best for me. The warning was clear, the battle lines already drawn. Nathan could walk away now, spare himself and Tyler the inevitable conflict with a man who had resources and determination on his side. Or he could stay, fight for something that felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years, and hope that love and integrity were enough weapons against money and influence. I'm not going anywhere. Nathan heard the words come out firm, certain, the same tone he'd used 5 years ago when promising Tyler they were a family now. Unless you want me to. Victoria leaned forward, closing the distance between them, her hand coming up to touch his face with a tenderness that made his breath catch. I don't want you to go anywhere. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, carrying the weight of new beginnings and the knowledge that this choice would complicate both their lives in ways they couldn't fully predict. When they pulled apart, foreheads touching, Nathan felt the terrifying exhilaration of commitment settling over him like a mantle. From the hallway, Tyler's voice drifted out, carefully casual. Are you guys done being gross? Because I want to show Ms. Victoria my Constellation app. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine, and Nathan felt something click into place. This right here was worth whatever storm Richard Brennan wanted to bring. The storm began Monday morning when Mrs. Helen Chen called to cancel her standing appointment. Her voice carried apologetic embarrassment, words coming out in a rush like she'd rehearsed them. Nathan, I'm so sorry. My husband says we need to take the Camry somewhere else. He heard something about your garage, said it's better if we find a new mechanic. Nathan stood in the garage office, phone pressed to his ear, confusion giving way to cold certainty. Mrs. Chen, you've been coming here 12 years. What did your husband hear? She wouldn't elaborate, just repeated the apology and ended the call with obvious discomfort. Nathan stared at the phone, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Richard Brennan wasn't just investigating, he was actively interfering. Frank appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his weathered face. That's the third cancellation this morning. Johnson Fleet Services pulled their contract, the Hendersons switched to that place in Manayunk, and now Mrs. Chen. What's going on, boss? Nathan set the phone down with careful precision, fury building beneath the surface calm. Someone's playing games. Over the next 3 days, the pattern became undeniable. Longtime customers suddenly finding new mechanics, corporate contracts evaporating without explanation, referrals drying up like Philadelphia in August. Tommy dug around through his network and came back with confirmation. The corporate clients all had ties to Brennan Industries or its suppliers. The individual customers had been quietly approached with suggestions that Parker's Auto Works might not be the reliable choice it appeared. By Thursday, the week's revenue sat at $1,100 against an average of $3,500. Nathan looked at the schedule, seeing gaps where appointments should have been, calculating how long they could sustain this kind of hit before serious decisions had to be made about payroll and rent. He didn't tell Victoria immediately, trying to handle it himself, unwilling to put her in the position of fighting her own father over his business. But Thursday evening, when Tyler came home from school with red eyes and the story of Bobby's father saying cruel things at pickup, Nathan's restraint shattered. Tyler sat at the kitchen table, small shoulders shaking with the effort of holding back tears. Bobby said Chew Nate is a gold digger, that you're only friends with Ms. Victoria for her money. His voice broke on the words. I told him that's not true, but Bobby's dad told everyone at school. Now some kids won't talk to me. Nathan knelt beside his nephew, rage and heartbreak warring in his chest, watching his choices hurt the person he'd sacrificed everything to protect. That's absolutely not true, Tyler. I care about Victoria because she's an amazing person. The money doesn't matter to me at all. Then why are people saying it? Tyler's question carried the weight of a child trying to understand adult cruelty. Because Victoria's father is playing ugly games to try to keep us apart. Nathan kept his voice gentle despite the fury burning through him. Sometimes grown-ups do mean things when they're scared of losing control. That's stupid. Tyler wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, anger replacing tears. Miss Victoria should tell him to stop. Nathan hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of playground dirt and children's shampoo, feeling the terrible weight of protecting Tyler from consequences he didn't deserve. She doesn't know yet, but I'm going to tell her tonight. The phone call lasted 40 minutes, Victoria's voice progressing from shocked to furious to devastated as Nathan laid out everything that had happened. The business sabotage, the social pressure, Tyler coming home crying because of gossip spread by parents who took their cues from Richard Brennan's disapproval. He went after Tyler. Victoria's voice shook with barely controlled rage. He made a child a target to get to you. I can handle pressure on the business. Nathan paced his small living room, phone pressed to his ear. But Tyler didn't sign up for this. He's 9 years old and getting bullied because your father decided I'm not good enough. I'll talk to him. The steel in Victoria's tone reminded Nathan that she hadn't built a successful career by backing down from fights. No, Nathan's response was immediate and firm. That's exactly what he wants. To create problems only he can solve, to make you choose between him and me, to prove I'm a burden you'll eventually resent. Then what do? Victoria's frustration matched his own. We fight back. Nathan stopped pacing, decision crystallizing. Not by hiding or giving up, by showing everyone we're serious about this, that we're partners facing this together. The plan took shape over the following days, Victoria making calls to Genesis Med executives and board members, not asking for favors but simply recommending an excellent mechanic who specialized in American vehicles. The response was immediate, appointments booking solid within 48 hours, high-end cars rolling into the garage driven by professionals who needed quality work and didn't care about Philadelphia society politics. Dr. Marcus Wong brought his Cadillac CT6 in on Tuesday, impressed enough by Nathan's diagnostic skills that he referred 3 colleagues by Wednesday. The schedule began filling again, not with the same customers Richard had scared away, but with new ones whose loyalty Richard couldn't touch. Frank watched the transformation with visible relief. Boss, we're booked out 3 weeks now. Whatever you did, it worked. Nathan tightened the final bolt on a Ford F-150's brake assembly, satisfaction mixing with the knowledge that the battle was far from over. We're adapting. That's all. But Richard Brennan wasn't finished. Nathan should have known a man with that much money and determination wouldn't stop at business interference. The next strike came from a direction Nathan hadn't anticipated, hitting where he was most vulnerable. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, plain manila with Nathan's name typed on the label, no return address. Inside was a single page, professional letterhead from a law firm Nathan didn't recognize. The words were formal and devastating. A concerned party has filed for a welfare check regarding the minor child residing at your address. Social services will be conducting a home visit within the next week to ensure adequate living conditions and proper care. Nathan read it 3 times, each pass making his hands shake harder. Someone had called social services on him. Someone had suggested Tyler wasn't being properly cared for. Someone was threatening the one thing in Nathan's life that mattered more than anything else. He called Victoria, voice tight with barely controlled panic. Your father just went after my custody of Tyler. The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. What? Nathan explained the letter, the implied threat, the terror of having his fitness as a guardian questioned by people with the power to remove Tyler from his home. Victoria listened without interrupting, her breathing the only sound indicating she was still there. When Nathan finished, her voice came through cold as Philadelphia winter. I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there. She arrived 20 minutes later, the fastest Nathan had ever seen her navigate from downtown. Tyler was at school, spared the knowledge of this new threat, giving them space to talk and without small ears absorbing adult fears. Victoria read the letter with the focused intensity of someone analyzing a technical problem, then set it down with controlled precision. This is my fault. Her voice carried guilt and fury in equal measure. He's using Tyler as leverage because nothing else worked. It's not your fault. Nathan sat across from her, hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking. Your father is responsible for his own choices. Victoria pulled out her phone, jaw set in a way that promised consequences. I'm calling him, now. This ends today. Sends. The conversation happened on speaker. Victoria's demand that Nathan hear everything. No more secrets or filtered information. Richard answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who believed he was winning. Victoria, I was hoping you'd call. Did you threaten Nathan's custody of Tyler? Victoria's question cut through any pretense of pleasantries. Richard's pause told them everything before his words did. I expressed concern to the appropriate authorities about the living situation of a minor child in the care of a man who may not have adequate resources. It's my civic duty. You filed a false report to intimidate him. Victoria's voice could have cut glass. That's not civic duty. That's abuse of the system. If Parker is providing adequate care, he has nothing to worry about. Richard's tone remained maddeningly calm. The investigation will clear him, and everyone moves on. Unless it doesn't, Nathan spoke for the first time, anger making his voice rough. Unless some social worker decides a two-bedroom apartment above a garage isn't good enough, or questions why a single man dropped out of college to raise a child. You're gambling with Tyler's life to make a point. If you truly cared about that child's welfare, you'd want to ensure he has every opportunity. Richard pivoted smoothly. Victoria could provide resources, education, experiences that a mechanic simply cannot. Unless, of course, this has never really been about Tyler's welfare at all. The implication hung in the air, poisonous and calculated. Richard was suggesting Nathan was using Tyler as a means to an end, keeping the child as bait to secure Victoria's money and resources. The accusation was so twisted, so deliberately cruel, that Nathan felt words fail him. You think Nathan is using his own nephew as a con? Victoria's voice shook with disbelief. The child he gave up everything for? The kid he raises alone because no one else stepped up? I think men do desperate things when they're struggling financially. Richard's response was delivered with the certainty of someone who'd already decided the truth. I'm simply ensuring my daughter isn't being manipulated by someone who sees her as a solution to his problems. The call ended with Victoria's promise that this wasn't over, that Richard had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But after she hung up, they sat in the small apartment, surrounded by Tyler's artwork and Nathan's careful budgeting, both aware that Richard's threat was real. The social services visit would happen. Tyler's future hung on the assessment of strangers who would judge Nathan's worthiness as a parent through metrics that couldn't measure love or sacrifice. We need to fight this publicly. Victoria's strategic mind was already working through options. If we expose what he's doing, show that this is retaliation, it weakens his credibility and puts Tyler in the spotlight. Nathan shook his head, protective instincts overriding strategy. I won't make my nephew a news story to win an argument. Then what? Victoria's frustration was evident. We let my father keep attacking until something breaks? Nathan looked around the apartment, at the life he'd built from grief and determination. Ordinary moments that felt precious because of how easily they might never have existed. I handle the social services visit, make sure our home is above reproach, show them Tyler is thriving, happy, well cared for, and we trust that the truth is enough. The doubt in Victoria's eyes mirrored the fear in Nathan's gut, but sometimes trust was all you had when the other side controlled all the traditional levers of power. The social services appointment hung over Nathan like a storm cloud, scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. He spent the weekend cleaning an apartment that was already spotless, organizing paperwork that documented every aspect of Tyler's care, preparing answers to questions he could only guess at. Tyler sensed the tension growing quieter as Nathan's anxiety manifested in obsessive attention to details that probably wouldn't matter to the caseworker anyway. Victoria wanted to be there to stand beside him as visible proof that Tyler had support beyond Nathan's limited resources. But they both knew her presence would complicate the assessment, raise questions about their relationship, and whether Nathan's motivations were pure or calculated. So she stayed away, texting encouragement every few hours, offering help Nathan couldn't accept without proving Richard's point. Monday night, Nathan lay awake staring at ceiling cracks he'd memorized years ago, listening to Tyler's steady breathing from the next room, wondering if this was the last week they'd spend in this apartment as a family. The fear wasn't rational, he knew that. Tyler was healthy, happy, thriving in school, surrounded by love and stability. But Richard Brennan had demonstrated a talent for making Nathan's worst fears feel plausible. Tuesday arrived cold and gray, October giving way to November with the kind of weather that made Philadelphia feel hostile. Nathan took a personal day from the garage, letting Frank handle the schedule while he prepared for the most important assessment of his life. He dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt, the closest thing to professional he owned that didn't smell like motor oil, and waited. The caseworker arrived precisely at 2, a woman in her 40s named Sharon Martinez, who carried a tablet and the kind of practiced neutral expression that revealed nothing. Nathan showed her into the apartment, hyper-aware of every worn piece of furniture, every scuff mark on the walls, every visible sign of their financial limitations. Sharon took in the space with methodical attention, making notes Nathan couldn't see. She asked to see Tyler's room first, following Nathan down the narrow hallway to where glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling in accurate constellation patterns. The room was small but clean, organized in a way that showed care. Tyler's science project sat on the desk alongside textbooks in a telescope positioned by the window. Does Tyler share this room? Sharon's question was neutral, but Nathan heard the implication beneath it. No, it's his own space. I sleep in the living room on the couch that folds out. Nathan kept his voice steady despite the anxiety churning in his gut. It's not ideal, but Tyler gets privacy and quiet for homework and sleep. Sharon made another note. And how long have you lived here? 5 years, since I got custody. Nathan followed her back to the main living area, watching her assess the kitchen, the modest furnishings, the bills stacked neatly on the counter because there was nowhere else to keep them. The rent is affordable and the neighborhood is safe. Tyler's school is 3 blocks away. The questions continued for an hour, covering everything from Tyler's medical history to Nathan's income to the support network they had in place. Nathan answered each one honestly, providing documentation when requested, aware that every response was being evaluated for adequacy by standards he didn't fully understand. Sharon asked about Tyler's mother, about Nathan's decision to drop out of MIT, about the debt load from Sarah's medical bills. She asked about childcare arrangements when Nathan worked, about Tyler's grades and social relationships, about long-term plans for Tyler's education. Each question felt like a test Nathan might be failing without knowing it. Finally, she asked the question Nathan had been dreading. Mr. Parker, I understand you're in a relationship with Victoria Brennan. How does that relationship affect Tyler's care and your financial situation? Nathan took a breath, choosing words carefully. Victoria and I are dating. She's met Tyler a few times and they get along well. But she doesn't live here, doesn't contribute financially to Tyler's care, and isn't involved in daily parenting decisions. She's my girlfriend, not Tyler's caretaker or my financial support. And if the relationship ended, Sharon's pen hovered over her tablet. Would that impact your ability to care for Tyler? The question revealed the trap Richard had laid. If Nathan said yes, he admitted to depending on Victoria's resources. If he said no, he had to prove he could manage alone while clearly struggling. Nathan met Sharon's gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated into the wrong answer. I've been caring for Tyler for 5 years on my income alone. Before Victoria, during the relationship, and after if it comes to that. My ability to parent Tyler has never depended on anyone but me. Sharon made her final notes, then set the tablet aside. Mr. Parker, I need to be direct with you. Someone filed a report suggesting Tyler might be at risk due to inadequate resources and unstable living conditions. Based on what I've seen today, those concerns appear unfounded. Relief flooded through Nathan so intensely it made him dizzy. Tyler is clearly well cared for, Sharon continued. He's excelling academically, has a stable home environment, and you've demonstrated consistent commitment to his welfare despite significant financial challenges. I'll be filing a report that closes this case with no recommended action. Nathan's throat tightened, emotion making it difficult to speak. Thank you, however. Sharon's expression shifted, carrying a warning. Whoever filed this report has resources and determination. This investigation closes, but that doesn't mean they won't try again with different allegations. My advice? Document everything. Keep records of Tyler's medical care, school performance, your financial management. Build a paper trail that makes it impossible to question your fitness as a guardian. After Sharon left, Nathan sat alone in the apartment that had passed inspection, relief giving way to anger at the violation of having strangers assess whether he deserved to keep raising the child he'd sacrificed everything for. He called Victoria, voice rough with exhausted emotion. "It's over. We're clear." Victoria's breath released in a rush. He could hear through the phone. "Thank God. Nathan, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Your father isn't going to stop, is he?" Nathan looked around the apartment, seeing it now as Richard must see it, inadequate and temporary, proof that Nathan couldn't provide the life of Brennan deserved. "He'll keep finding new ways to prove I'm not good enough. Then we show him he's wrong." Victoria's voice carried determination. "Not by defending ourselves, but by going on offense. We make this public, tell the truth about what he's been doing, and let people decide who's really protecting me and who's trying to control me." The idea terrified and exhilarated Nathan in equal measure. Victoria was proposing they turn private conflict into public battle, gambling that transparency would protect them better than discretion. It was risky, potentially exposing Tyler to scrutiny neither of them wanted, but it was also the only way to fight an opponent who controlled the traditional battlefield. "What did you have in mind?" Nathan heard the shift in his own voice, from defensive to strategic, accepting that some fights required weapons he'd never wanted to pick up. A press conference. Victoria's plan was already formed, thought through with the same precision she brought to engineering problems. Genesis Med's quarterly investor update is Friday. I'll add a personal statement about my father's interference in my private life. Make it clear this isn't about protecting me, it's about controlling me. That puts a target on your back professionally. Nathan's concern was immediate. "The board won't like you airing family drama. The board will like it less if I leave Genesis Med because my father made working there impossible." Victoria's confidence was solid, built on years of proving herself in rooms that didn't think she belonged. "I'm the reason the mobility division is profitable. They'll back me or lose their best asset." "And Tyler?" Nathan needed to know she'd considered all the angles. "This makes him part of the story. Tyler is already part of the story because my father made him one." Victoria's voice gentled. "But we control the narrative. We tell the truth on our terms before Richard's version becomes the only version people hear." Nathan thought about Tyler coming home crying, about the social services investigation, about the customers who'd abandoned the garage based on whispers and suggestions. Richard Brennan had already made this war public in every way that mattered. Victoria was just proposing they fight back in daylight instead of shadows. "Okay," Nathan felt the decision settle into his bones. Commitment and terror mixing into something that felt like courage. "Let's do it." The press conference took shape over the next 2 days, Victoria coordinating with Genesis Med's communications team while managing pushback from nervous board members. Nathan spent Wednesday and Thursday working double shifts at the garage, building a buffer of completed jobs in case Friday's revelation brought new complications. Tyler absorbed the tension without complaint, retreating into a science project with the focus of a child who'd learned early that adult problems weren't his to solve. Friday morning dawned cold and bright, the kind of November day that made the Delaware River look like hammered steel. Nathan dressed in the same clothes he'd worn for the social services visit, as close to professional as his wardrobe allowed, and drove downtown to the Genesis Med building with hands that wanted to shake on the steering wheel. Victoria met him in the lobby, composure wrapped around her like armor, but he could see the tension in how tightly she gripped her chair's controls. The press conference was scheduled for 11, giving her time to run through talking points one final time, to make sure Nathan understood his role and boundaries, to prepare for the moment they'd make their private struggle devastatingly public. The conference room filled with reporters, cameras, and live stream equipment, business journalists expecting routine corporate updates, suddenly aware that something more interesting was developing. Victoria positioned herself at the head of the table, Nathan standing slightly behind and to the side, visible but not central, his presence itself a statement. Victoria opened with the expected quarterly numbers: mobility division revenue up 18%, 3 new patents filed, clinical trials progressing ahead of schedule. The journalist took dutiful notes, waiting for whatever had justified the unusual personal attendance notification they'd received that morning. Then Victoria shifted, her voice taking on an edge that made everyone in the room lean forward. I'm adding a personal statement today because my private life has become entangled with professional considerations in ways that affect Genesis Med's mission and my ability to lead effectively. The room went completely still, phones lifting as reporters sensed a story developing beyond quarterly earnings. For the past 6 weeks, my father, Richard Brennan, has conducted a systematic campaign to interfere in my personal relationship with Nathan Parker. Victoria's calm recitation of facts was devastating in its precision. This interference has included business sabotage, social pressure, filing false reports with Child Protective Services, and using his business connections to intimidate a small business owner whose only offense was caring about me. Murmurs spread through the assembled press, cameras swinging to capture Nathan's reaction. He kept his face neutral, hands clasped behind his back, trying to project calm he didn't feel. This isn't a family disagreement. Victoria's voice strengthened, carrying the conviction that had built her career. This is about control, about whether a disabled executive can make her own choices about her personal life. My father believes my injury makes me vulnerable to manipulation. The irony is that he's the one trying to manipulate everyone around me to prove a point. A reporter near the front raised her hand. Ms. Brennan, are you saying your father filed the CPS report? I'm saying someone with resources and detailed knowledge of Nathan's custody situation filed a false report designed to intimidate him into ending our relationship. Victoria met the camera directly. The investigation found no merit to the allegations. Tyler Parker is thriving under his uncle's care. But the damage was done. A 9-year-old child was made aware that powerful people questioned whether his family was good enough. The room erupted with questions, reporters shouting over each other. But Victoria raised her hand for silence. I'm making this public because private appeals to my father have failed. He's demonstrated he'll use any leverage available, hurt anyone necessary, to maintain control over my decisions. I'm asking him to stop. And I'm asking you all to understand that this isn't about protecting me. It's about respecting my autonomy as an adult capable of choosing her own relationships. She turned slightly, including Nathan in her address. Nathan Parker is a good man who sacrificed his education and career to raise his nephew when no one else stepped forward. He owns a successful business built through hard work and integrity. He treats me with respect and kindness. These facts should be enough. My father's wealth and connections shouldn't give him the power to destroy someone's life simply because he doesn't approve of who his daughter loves. The word hung in the air, unplanned but undeniable. Loves. Victoria had just declared her feelings in front of cameras and reporters, making private emotion into public record. Nathan felt his chest constrict, the weight of that declaration settling over him like a benediction and a burden. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes. Victoria fielding questions with practiced ease, never losing composure even when queries veered toward the personal and invasive. She refused to discuss her medical condition beyond acknowledging her injury, redirected attempts to pit her against her father into statements about autonomy and respect, and consistently brought the conversation back to the core issue, whether powerful people could use their resources to control others' intimate choices. When it finally ended, the room cleared slowly, journalists already typing on phones, filing stories that would hit news sites before Nathan and Victoria made it to the elevator. The communications director looked simultaneously thrilled and terrified, aware that Victoria had just generated more press attention than Genesis Med typically received in a quarter. In the elevator down, alone finally, Nathan found his voice. You said you loved me, in front of everyone. Victoria met his gaze steadily, no hesitation or regret visible. I do. Is that okay? Nathan crossed the small space, leaning down to kiss her with a tenderness that carried everything he couldn't articulate in the moment. When they separated, foreheads touching, he whispered the truth that had been building since she'd let him wipe BBQ sauce from her shoe. I love you too. Have for weeks. Just didn't want to say it while everything was so complicated. Everything is still complicated. Victoria's smile was gentle, acknowledging reality without retreating from it. But at least now we're complicated together. The social media reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Clips from the press conference went viral within hours. #TrustVictoria, trending alongside #WorkingClassHero, comment sections filling with support and criticism in equal measure. Some praised Victoria's courage in standing up to family pressure. Others questioned whether she was being manipulated exactly as Richard claimed. The debate raged across platforms, strangers taking sides in a conflict they understood only through sound bites and assumptions. Richard's response came that evening, a statement released through his attorney expressing deep concern for his daughter's well-being and sadness that private family matters had been made public. The statement carefully avoided confirming or denying specific allegations while painting Richard as a worried father whose only crime was loving his daughter too much. It was masterfully crafted, designed to maintain sympathy while admitting nothing. But the damage was done. Philadelphia's business community was talking, dividing into camps based on whether they valued traditional family authority or individual autonomy. Some of Richard's oldest connections quietly distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the public display of control. Others rallied around him, seeing Victoria's actions as disrespectful rebellion that justified paternal intervention. The Brennan mansion felt larger and emptier than Richard remembered, rooms that had once held Catherine's warmth now echoing with his footsteps. He stood in his study, watching news coverage of Victoria's press conference for the fourth time, each viewing making the isolation more acute. His daughter had just declared war on him in front of the world, and he'd responded with carefully worded denials that convinced no one. Maggie O'Brien appeared in the doorway, the housekeeper who'd worked for the family 30 years carrying a tea service Richard hadn't requested. She set it down on the desk with more force than necessary, her Irish-American directness showing through professional boundaries worn thin by decades of service. "You're watching that again." Her tone made it clear this was a statement, not a question. Richard didn't look away from the screen. "My daughter just accused me of abuse in front of the entire city. Your daughter just told the truth in the only language you seem to understand anymore." Maggie poured tea neither of them would drink, her movements sharp with contained frustration. "Money and power. That's all you hear these days, Mr. Brennan. Not love, not trust, just who controls what. I'm protecting her." Richard finally turned from the screen, needing someone to understand his perspective. Victoria doesn't see how vulnerable she is. Men like Parker prey on women with money, especially women who've been through trauma. "I've seen it happen too many times, have you?" Maggie's question was pointed. "Or have you decided that anyone who loves your daughter without your permission must be using her?" Richard thought of the boyfriend after the accident, the one who'd asked for $200,000 and disappeared when Richard had him investigated. The investment advisor who'd tried to charge Victoria triple the standard rate, banking on her grief and confusion. The lawyer who'd promised millions in lawsuit settlements while planning to take 40% of nothing. Every threat he'd methodically eliminated, protecting his daughter from predators drawn to wealth and vulnerability. People showed me who they were. Richard's certainty wavered under Maggie's steady gaze. They proved my concerns were justified. Some of them, maybe. Maggie settled into the chair across from his desk, abandoning professional distance for the familiarity of someone who'd seen him at his best and worst. But that doesn't mean everyone is a threat. And it doesn't mean you get to decide who Victoria loves. She doesn't understand the risks. Richard's voice came out quieter, revealing the fear beneath the control. After Catherine died after the accident, people came out of nowhere, everyone wanting something. So you decided to trust no one. Maggie's observation was gentle but unsparing. Including your own daughter's judgment. Richard looked at the frozen image of Victoria on his computer screen, fierce and certain, more like Catherine than he wanted to admit. His wife had possessed that same steel wrapped in compassion, the ability to see people clearly without assuming the worst. She'd loved Richard despite his controlling nature, had gentled him in ways he'd forgotten until she was gone. Miss Catherine wouldn't want this. Maggie's words landed like a physical blow. She'd be heartbroken seeing you and Victoria like this. Catherine's final weeks played through Richard's memory, her hand in his as cancer consumed her from the inside, her voice already weakened but still insistent. "Promise me you'll take care of our girl. Don't let anyone hurt her, but, Richard, don't let fear make you cruel. Love her enough to trust her choices." He'd kept the first promise obsessively, protecting Victoria with all the resources at his disposal. But the second promise had been lost somewhere in the grief and panic of watching his daughter rebuild her life from a wheelchair, while his wife died in the bedroom upstairs. Fear had made him exactly what Catherine warned against. What do I do? The question came out broken. A powerful man discovering his power had isolated him from everyone who mattered. How do I fix this? Maggie stood, smoothing her apron with the practical efficiency that had run the household for 3 decades. You start by actually listening to what Victoria said. Then you meet this Nathan Parker without assuming he's the enemy. And mostly you apologize for trying to control your daughter's life instead of trusting her to live it. After Maggie left, Richard sat alone with the tea growing cold and the truth settling like lead in his stomach. He'd spent 6 weeks trying to prove Nathan Parker was using Victoria, had deployed every resource and connection to find evidence that never materialized, because it didn't exist. Because sometimes people were exactly who they appeared to be, and the only manipulation happening was Richard's. He pulled up Nathan's file one last time, reading beyond the financial data to the story beneath. A 22-year-old on full scholarship to MIT, senior year, future bright and certain. Then his sister's overdose, a toddler left alone, and a choice made in the space between one life and another. No hesitation in the timeline, no calculated pause to weigh options, just immediate custody filing, withdrawal from school, and every decision after oriented around raising Tyler. Richard had sacrificed for Catherine and Victoria, building wealth to provide security and opportunity. But Nathan had sacrificed differently, giving up everything he'd worked toward for a child who wasn't even his biological responsibility. That took a kind of love Richard understood intellectually, but had never been tested with personally. His wealth had always made sacrifice theoretical. Nathan's lack of wealth had made sacrifice real. The phone call he needed to make terrified him more than any business negotiation ever had. Admitting he was wrong required dismantling the certainty that had guided every decision since Catherine's death. But Maggie was right. Catherine would be devastated by what he'd become, by how fear had twisted protection into cruelty. Richard picked up his phone and made a call he should have made weeks ago. Nathan was closing up the garage when his phone rang with an unknown number. He almost ignored it, exhausted from a day that had felt like running an emotional marathon, but something made him answer. The voice on the other end was formal, controlled, unmistakably Richard Brennan. "Mr. Parker, this is Richard Brennan. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning if you're available. Just the two of us to talk." Nathan's first instinct was refusal, a visceral rejection of engaging with the man who tried to destroy his business and threatened his custody of Tyler. But something in Richard's tone stopped him, a quality he couldn't quite identify that sounded less like the entitled businessman and more like someone who'd lost his way. "Why should I agree to that?" Nathan kept his voice level, refusing to make this easy. "Because you deserve an explanation." Richard's response came without the condescension Nathan had expected. "And because I owe you the courtesy of hearing me out in person before you decide whether I'm redeemable or not." The honesty was unexpected enough to shift Nathan's calculus. "Victoria's going to have opinions about this. I'm not calling Victoria." Richard's admission carried weight. "This conversation needs to happen between you and me first, if you're willing." Nathan thought about Tyler, about the social services investigation, about customers frightened away, and the careful life he'd built from sacrifice and determination. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to let Richard Brennan stew in the consequences of his actions without offering absolution or understanding. But Nathan had spent 5 years teaching Tyler that everyone deserved a chance to do better, that mistakes could be learning opportunities if people were brave enough to admit them. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, at the garage. Nathan made the terms clear. My territory, my schedule. If you're late, I'm not waiting. I'll be there. Richard's acceptance was simple. No negotiation or counteroffer. "Thank you." After hanging up, Nathan stood in the quiet garage surrounded by tools and the honest smell of motor oil, wondering if he'd just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step towards something that might resemble peace. Victoria called minutes later, having clearly been alerted by someone in Richard's household that her father was making moves. Nathan, what did he want? To meet tomorrow morning. Just us. Nathan leaned against his workbench, anticipating her objections. "Before you argue, I already said yes." The silence on Victoria's end lasted long enough for Nathan to wonder if the call had dropped. Finally, her voice came through, carefully neutral. "Why?" because I don't think this ends until your father and I actually talk without lawyers or press conferences between us. Nathan rubbed his eyes, exhaustion making his voice rough. And because Tyler asked me yesterday if Ms. Victoria's dad is always going to hate us, and I want to be able to tell him no. Victoria's breath caught audibly. What did you tell him? That sometimes people do mean things when they're scared, and that scared people can learn to be brave. Nathan heard the echo of Tyler's own words back to him, the wisdom of a 9-year-old cutting through adult complications. I can't ask Richard to be brave if I'm not willing to be brave enough to listen. Promise me you'll call if he threatens you again. Victoria's concern was palpable. Promise me you won't let him manipulate you into giving up. I promise. Nathan felt the weight of commitment to Victoria and Tyler and himself, the determination to protect what they were building without being controlled by fear. But I also promise to actually listen, because that's what you asked your father to do, and I can't expect from him what I'm not willing to give. The next morning arrived with the kind of cold that made Philadelphia feel like it was bracing for winter's full arrival. Nathan opened the garage at 8, working on routine maintenance for a Dodge Charger that didn't require complex thought, keeping his hands busy while his mind churned through possible conversations and outcomes. Richard Brennan arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, pulling up in a Lincoln Continental that probably cost more than Nathan's annual revenue. He emerged wearing slacks and a sweater, deliberate casualness that suggested effort, and approached the garage with the posture of someone walking into uncertain territory. Nathan wiped his hands on a shop rag, studying the man who'd tried to dismantle his life. Richard looked older than his 64 years, exhaustion visible in lines the carefully maintained beard couldn't hide, shadows under eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as Nathan had. Mr. Brennan, Nathan's greeting was neutral, offering neither hostility nor welcome. We can talk in the office. The office was a cramped space with a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered in work orders and parts catalogs. Richard settled into the offered chair with visible discomfort, a man accustomed to controlling spaces now subject to someone else's territory and rules. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Richard's formality was careful, like someone learning a new language. I know I haven't given you any reason to extend courtesy. You threatened my family. Nathan saw no purpose in softening the truth. So no, courtesy wasn't my first instinct. Richard nodded, accepting the judgment. I want to explain, not excuse. There's a difference, and I need you to understand I'm aware of that difference. The distinction was more nuanced than Nathan had expected from a man he'd mentally categorized as simply villainous. He waited, letting Richard carry the weight of explanation. After Victoria's accident, people came. Richard's hands clasped together, the grip tight enough to whiten knuckles. Investment advisors charging triple rates because they thought grief made her vulnerable. Lawyers promising millions in settlements to collect their percentage before disappearing. A boyfriend who lasted 3 months before asking for $200,000 for a startup that never existed. Nathan absorbed this, understanding beginning to form around the edges of his anger. So you learn not to trust anyone. I learned that wealth makes my daughter a target. Richard's voice was steady but carrying pain beneath the surface. Then Catherine got sick. Stage 4 when they found it, 6 months from diagnosis to death. And during those 6 months, more people came, promising miracle cures for fees, offering to pray for payment, selling hope they had no ability to deliver. Nathan thought about Tyler's first year with him, the terror of making every decision alone, the constant fear of getting something crucial wrong. He'd had community support, neighbors who checked on them, teachers who gave extra attention to a traumatized child. But he'd also been approached by people offering help that came with strings, opportunities that would have benefited them more than Tyler. The difference was scale and resources, but the instinct to protect was something Nathan understood intimately. So when Victoria started seeing me, you assumed I was another con. Nathan kept his voice level, not yet offering absolution, but willing to understand. I assumed everyone is a con until proven otherwise. Richard met his gaze directly. That's what losing Catherine taught me. That's what watching Victoria rebuild her life in a wheelchair reinforced. Trust no one, verify everything, protect at all costs, even if the cost is Victoria's happiness. Nathan's statement was flat, factual, even then. Richard's admission was quiet, because I convinced myself that temporary unhappiness was better than permanent betrayal. that she'd thank me eventually for saving her from another mistake. Except I'm not a mistake. Nathan leaned forward slightly, needing Richard to hear this clearly. I gave up MIT because Tyler needed me. I built a business through work, not shortcuts. I pay my debts even when it means being late on other bills. Those aren't the choices of someone looking for an easy target. I know. Richard's shoulders sagged, the posture of defeat unfamiliar on a man who'd built an empire through confidence. I've known since the investigation turned up nothing but evidence of exactly who you claim to be. But knowing and accepting are different things, and I've been too scared to accept that maybe Victoria's judgment is sound. The confession hung between them, raw and real, a powerful man admitting the fear that had driven every cruel decision. Nathan thought about forgiving him, about offering the kind of grace Tyler would expect. But forgiveness required more than understanding motive. It required genuine change, proof that Richard wouldn't simply retreat to old patterns once this conversation ended. What do you want from me? Nathan's question was blunt. Absolution? Permission to keep interfering with conditions? A promise I'll walk away if you offer enough money? Richard's head snapped up, something like pain flashing across his face. I want a chance to start over. To meet you without assumptions and to know Tyler beyond the file my investigator compiled. To try being Victoria's father instead of her controller. The request was more than Nathan had expected, vulnerable in a way that suggested genuine desire for change rather than strategic repositioning. But words were easy. Richard had demonstrated he could be articulate and convincing while actively sabotaging Nathan's life. Proof would require actions sustained over time. Tyler came home crying because of gossip your pressure created. Nathan's voice went hard, protective instinct overriding the softening he'd felt. A 9-year-old had to hear his uncle called a gold digger. Had to wonder if his family was good enough. That's not something you apologize away. You're right. Richard didn't deflect or minimize. What I did to that child is unforgivable, but I'm asking for the chance to try anyway. To be someone in his life who makes it better instead of harder. Nathan stood, pacing the small office, needing movement to process the conversation's direction. Victoria loves you. Despite everything, she wants her father back. But the father she wants is someone who trusts her judgment and respects her choices. I haven't been that father in a long time. Richard's admission was quiet. Catherine knew how to love without controlling. I never learned. After she died, I only got worse. Then learned now. Nathan stopped pacing, decision crystallizing. Meet Tyler, but as Victoria's father who wants to know him, not as an investigator looking for ammunition. Come to dinner. Ask about his science project. See who he actually is. And if you can do that without agenda or judgment, maybe we can build something that doesn't require Victoria choosing between us. Richard stood, extending his hand across the small desk. I'd like that, more than I can express. Nathan took the offered hand, gripped firm but not hostile, sealing an agreement that felt fragile and significant in equal measure. This doesn't fix everything. We're not friends. But for Victoria's sake and Tyler's, we can try not being enemies. That's more grace than I deserve. Richard's voice carried genuine gratitude. Thank you. After Richard left, Nathan sat alone in the office processing what had just happened. He'd extended an olive branch to the man who'd tried to destroy him, gambling that Richard's fear could transform into something healthier given time and opportunity. It might be the smartest decision he'd ever made, or the most naive, but either way, it was done. He called Victoria, knowing she'd been waiting anxiously for news. Your father and I talked, and the single word carried volumes of hope and fear. And he's coming to dinner next week, to meet Tyler properly, as your father instead of an adversary. Nathan heard his own surprise in the words. I don't know if this works, but we're going to try. Victoria's breath released in something between a laugh and a sob. Thank you for giving him a chance when he doesn't deserve one. I'm giving us all a chance, Nathan corrected gently, to be a family in whatever weird configuration that takes. Because Tyler deserves grandparents and you deserve your father. And I deserve to stop fighting battles that don't need to be fought. The following week passed in cautious optimism, Richard making no aggressive moves while Nathan and Victoria prepared Tyler for meeting Mr. Brennan under circumstances that might actually lead somewhere positive. They explained that Victoria's father had been wrong about some things, but wanted to make amends. that adults sometimes made mistakes and needed chances to do better, just like Tyler got chances when he messed up at school. Tyler absorbed this with the pragmatism of a child who'd already seen adults fail and recover. Will he like my science project? If he has any sense at all. Victoria's confidence was genuine. Your project is incredible. The dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday, giving everyone time to adjust to the idea of Richard Brennan sitting at Nathan's small kitchen table, eating food that didn't cost more than the average person's grocery budget for a week. Nathan planned the menu carefully, nothing fancy but made with care, the kind of meal that had sustained him and Tyler through 5 years of building family from grief. Saturday arrived clear and cold, December beginning to assert itself over Philadelphia with the promise of snow before Christmas. Nathan spent the morning cleaning while Tyler worked on finishing touches to his science project, wanting it perfect for showing to someone whose opinion suddenly mattered more than seemed fair given Richard's history. Richard arrived exactly on time, carrying a wrapped gift that made Tyler's eyes go wide with curiosity and Nathan's chest tighten with wariness about expensive presents designed to buy affection. But when Tyler opened it, the contents were perfect. A professional star chart customized to show the Philadelphia sky on the night Tyler was born, with notations about visible planets and constellations. This is so cool. Tyler's enthusiasm was genuine, all awkwardness forgotten in the excitement of receiving something that spoke directly to his passion. Look, Chew Nate, you can see Jupiter was in conjunction with Saturn. Richard's smile carried relief and pleasure at getting something right. I remembered Victoria mentioning your interest in astronomy. Thought you might like to know what the sky looked like the night you came into the world. Nathan caught Victoria's eye across the room, seeing the hope and fragile happiness there, and felt his resistance to Richard soften another degree. This was what family looked like when people tried, imperfect and awkward, but oriented toward connection instead of control. Dinner was chaotic in the way meals with excited 9-year-olds always were. Tyler dominating conversation with detailed explanations of orbital mechanics and planetary atmospheres, while the adults listened with varying degrees of comprehension. Richard asked genuine questions, admitting when Tyler's knowledge exceeded his own, treating the child like an intelligent person whose interests mattered. After dinner, while Nathan and Victoria cleaned up, Richard and Tyler sat at the table examining the science project with serious attention to detail. Nathan watched from the kitchen, seeing Richard crouch beside Tyler's chair to get a better angle on Saturn's rings, the powerful businessman becoming simply a grandfather interested in his grandson's work. Victoria's hand found Nathan's, squeezing gently. Thank you for making this possible. He's trying. Nathan squeezed back. That's all anyone can do. The evening ended with promises of future dinners, with Richard asking Tyler about school and science club meetings, with the tentative construction of relationship built on present effort rather than past grievances. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was the possibility of moving forward instead of remaining frozen in conflict. After Richard left, Tyler immediately asked when Mr. Brennan could come again, whether he might want to see the planetarium show next month, if having a grandfather was always this nice or if today was special. The questions revealed how much Tyler had been missing without knowing it, the shape of family expanding to include possibilities Nathan had never imagined offering. He's Victoria's dad, so yeah, I think he'll want to keep visiting. Nathan tucked Tyler into bed, straightening the star chart now hanging prominently on the wall. But remember, family isn't just about biology. It's about people who show up and care about you, like you and Ms. Victoria. Tyler's observation was matter of fact, already incorporating them into his understanding of family structure. And now Mr. Brennan, too, if he keeps being nice. Nathan kissed his nephew's forehead, heart full with gratitude for Tyler's resilience and capacity for trust despite everything. Yeah, buddy, like all of us. Later, with Tyler asleep and Victoria curled against him on the fold-out couch, Nathan felt the pieces of his life rearranging into configurations he'd stopped letting himself imagine. The garage was thriving with new customers. Tyler had a grandfather who seemed genuinely interested in being present, and Victoria, brilliant and fierce, and somehow choosing him despite every rational reason to walk away, was talking about futures that included all of them. I want to show you something. Nathan pulled out his phone, navigating to photos he'd saved months ago but never shared. Beach houses near Cape May, small places within driving distance of Philadelphia, properties he'd bookmarked while daydreaming about futures he couldn't afford. I've been thinking about Tyler in the ocean, how he's never really experienced it because we can't afford the trip. Victoria studied the images, understanding dawning in her expression. You want to take him to the beach. I want to take both of you. Nathan's voice carried hope and vulnerability. Not some elaborate vacation, just a weekend where Tyler can see the ocean and we can be together somewhere that isn't defined by garage schedules and work obligations. Victoria scrolled through the photos, pausing on one that showed a modest house with a ramp leading to the front door and wide doorways visible through windows. This one is accessible, I know. Nathan had noticed that detail, had imagined Victoria moving through those spaces, had let himself dream about three people becoming a family in deliberate, chosen ways. I'm not asking you to pay for it. I'm just asking if you'd want to go, if I can save up enough. What if we went next month? Victoria's suggestion was gentle, aware of his pride, but pushing anyway. What if you let me contribute because I want to be part of making Tyler's first ocean trip special? Not because you need my money, but because that's what partners do. Nathan thought about accepting, about letting Victoria share the cost of creating memories that would belong to all of them. Pride warred with practicality, with the growing understanding that partnership meant receiving as well as giving, that love required vulnerability in both directions. Okay, the word came out rough, emotion making it unsteady. Yeah, let's do that. Together. Victoria's kiss was tender, promising, sealing an agreement that felt like more than planning a trip. It felt like commitment to futures that included each other, to building something that honored where they'd come from while creating space for where they might go. Outside, Philadelphia settled into December night, city lights reflecting off clouds that promised snow by morning. Inside the small apartment, three people who'd found each other through disaster and determination slept peacefully, dreaming of oceans and stars and the simple miracle of family chosen rather than assigned. The beach trip was scheduled for the weekend before Christmas, 3 days carved out of busy schedules and winter weather that threatened but never quite delivered the snow accumulation that would have made driving impossible. Nathan closed the garage early Friday afternoon, Frank handling the weekend emergency calls, Tommy and the crew offering genuine enthusiasm for the boss finally taking time off. Tyler could barely contain his excitement, packed days in advance with swim trunks he'd never worn and sandals that would be too cold for December beaches, but represented his determination to experience everything properly. The drive to Cape May took 2 hours through South Jersey landscape, transitioning from urban to rural, past towns that decorated for Christmas with enthusiasm bordering on competitive. The house Victoria had rented was small, but perfect, single story with wide doorways and a deck overlooking the beach. Tyler claimed his room immediately, dumping his bag and racing to the windows to confirm that, yes, the ocean was actually visible from his bedroom. Nathan and Victoria settled into the master bedroom with its view of dunes and the Atlantic beyond, the sound of waves audible even through closed windows. That evening they walked the beach, Tyler racing ahead to touch the water despite the cold, laughing when waves soaked his shoes and made him dance backward. Nathan pushed Victoria's chair through firm sand, stopping where the beach met the water to watch Tyler collect shells and chase seagulls with pure joy, unfiltered by adult awareness, that moments like this were temporary and precious. He's never been this happy. Nathan's voice carried wonder and gratitude. I've tried so hard to give him everything he needs, but I couldn't give him this. You gave him yourself. Victoria's hand found his, cold from the December air, but warm with connection. Everything else is just details. They stayed until sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples that looked impossible, until Tyler finally wore himself out and agreed to head back for dinner. Inside the warm house, Nathan cooked while Victoria and Tyler worked on a puzzle at the kitchen table. The domestic scene so ordinary and extraordinary that Nathan had to pause and simply breathe through the gratitude threatening to overwhelm him. After Tyler went to bed, exhausted from sun and wind and newness, Nathan and Victoria sat on the deck wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching moonlight on water and listening to the endless rhythm of waves. The conversation drifted from nothing important to everything that mattered, building understanding through shared silence as much as words. I want this. Victoria's statement was quiet but certain. Not just weekends, but a life. With you and Tyler, building something that's ours. Nathan's heart did complicated things in his chest, hope and fear tangling into something that felt like the edge of commitment. I want that too, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. I'll probably never finish my degree. The garage will always be modest. Tyler's going to need help with college that I can't provide alone. Victoria turned to face him fully, moonlight catching in her eyes. I don't care about your degree or your income. I care that you're the kind of man who gave up everything for a child who needed you, who treats me like a whole person, who sees challenges as problems to solve instead of reasons to give up. She reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a small box that made Nathan's breathing stop entirely. I wasn't planning to do this tonight, but suddenly waiting feels pointless. We've already chosen each other. Might as well make it official. Inside the box was a simple band, titanium like her wheelchair, elegant in its understated strength. Victoria's hands shook slightly as she held it out. Nathan Parker, will you marry me? Nathan's laugh came out choked with tears he didn't try to hide. I was supposed to ask you. I've been saving for a ring. So we'll both ask. Victoria's smile was bright enough to rival the moon. I ask now, you ask later when you have the ring you chose. Either way, the answer better be yes. Nathan took the ring, sliding it onto his finger where it fit perfectly, like she'd somehow known his size without measuring. Yes, absolutely, completely yes. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that carried all the certainty he'd been too scared to voice before. I love you. I'm going to spend my life proving you didn't make a mistake choosing someone like me. The only mistake would be letting fear stop us from building what we both want. Victoria's voice was fierce, determined. We've already fought for this. Now we get to enjoy it. They sat wrapped together until the cold drove them inside, until exhaustion won over the desire to stay suspended in this moment of perfect happiness. In the bedroom, falling asleep to the sound of waves and Tyler's soft breathing from the next room, Nathan felt the future rearrange itself into something both terrifying and beautiful, full of possibility instead of limitation. Tomorrow, they'd take Tyler to see the lighthouse, would walk the winter beach collecting memories instead of shells, would continue building family from choice and love in the determination to see each other clearly. But tonight, Nathan let himself simply be grateful for the journey that had led him here. From MIT's abandoned scholarship to this modest beach house, from the loss of his sister to the gain of a son, and now a fiancé, who saw his life as worth sharing rather than saving. The titanium band on his finger caught moonlight through the window, solid and real, proof that sometimes the right person walked in exactly when you needed them most. And sometimes being brave about love was the smartest thing you could do.